Hey everybody, welcome back to Great Mondays Radio. With us today is Jelena Djordjevic. She is the Chief People Officer at Thumbtack, and they're doing some really interesting stuff around their talent, a few different talent initiatives that I think is really, really compelling, and very excited about kind of some of the work that they're doing there. So Jelena, thank you so much for coming on Great Mondays Radio.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here.
So let's just start with who are you? What is Thumbtack? Just introduce yourself. What credibility do you have? Why should these people listen to what you have to say?
I like it. Start with a spicy question. Um,
Why should we care?
why should you care? So I am the Chief People Officer at Thumbtack. I've actually been at Thumbtack for 6 years, first as Chief of Staff, and then over the last 3.5 years leading our people team. And Thumbtack, for those of you who don't know, is the only app you need to take care of your home. So we're a local services marketplace where we help you find local pros for anything from plumbing to electricians. I've actually got a plumber in my bathroom right now. And we, as a company, care really deeply about culture, about our employees, and have been very lucky to be able to really invest in our culture and to our employees and to really innovate with our working model and how we think about maximizing the impact of our employees. So I'm very excited to talk to you about some of our initiatives.
Amazing. All right, so let's level set. How you are now 100% remote. That's correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And that was not the case before the pandemic, right? That was a transition. You're one of the organizations that made that decision to transition to 100% remote. Can you give us the quick backstory on how you made that choice?
Yeah, we were not only were we 100% in office, we couldn't even work from home on Fridays. Like it was 9 to 5 in the office. We offered all 3 meals there if people so chose. And COVID, like everybody else, sent us home. We all went home in early March. And just sort of, got used to the new world for a few months. But in the summer, that first summer of COVID, 4 or 5 months into the pandemic, I think we saw the writing on the wall that both COVID was going to be around for a while and that the world had fundamentally changed, and that we had started seeing a lot of benefits of virtual work. So historically, we had 3 offices: San Francisco, Salt Lake, and Manila. And we had really big divides between the offices and worked so hard to build bridges, foster cross-functional collaboration, to have leaders fly around from office to office for all hands. And overnight, these divisions just went away because everybody showed up equally, and had an equal seat at the table on Zoom. And so all of a sudden, like, you could level the playing field. All voices were heard. Cross-functional collaboration was easier in some ways. Granted, we all had to get used to Zoom and virtual work. And our employees all of a sudden had this newfound flexibility where they could live anywhere in the country, or, at that time it was the US and the Philippines. We acquired a company in Canada a little bit after, so we added Canada on board. And we could access talent from anywhere. And so we just really started to see the benefits of it. And undertook a very deliberate process where we spent 4 or 5 months really investigating like the different options, from going back to the office, hub and spoke model, hybrid, virtual. And we realized through this, what started off as kind of a logistics question of like, where should we work? How many days a week? Like which teams, when and where? We
Yeah.
realized quickly that it was actually much more an exercise of defining our culture and what cultural principles we wanted to be true. So really reasoning from first principles. And we landed on wanting to preserve a very inclusive culture, a strong sense of belonging that we always cherished, but really leaning into flexibility, which is something that previously we didn't have. And so we defined these principles, these cultural principles that really guided us and became our why and enabled us to really lean into virtual work from a first principles perspective, as opposed to a very opportunistic perspective, which is, I think, what some companies did, where they were
Absolutely.
just chasing talent and then they flip-flopped. And once they had the talent, they brought them back to the office through RTO. But we've stood by virtual work ever since that. For us, what was a total 180.
Yeah. How many employees are at Thumbtack? Employees, contractors, workers?
Yeah, we've got 1,100 employees in the US, Canada, and the Philippines. And in the US, they're across 30 different states.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's definitely one of the big benefits of going 100% remote. All right. So let's start getting into, there's a few we talked a little bit about before we got on air, some of the initiatives, the people initiatives. And one that I'm really interested about is how you've evolved your performance reviews, and you're calling it the what and the how. Can you describe what this is and how it's different from the other one? Thank you very much. And how it's different from what you used to do.
No pun intended, right?
No pun intended. Yeah.
I'll tell you what it is and how it's different. Yeah, so we have, for many years had a performance review system and cycle. We did twice a year cycles, and feedback structured around strengths and development opportunities. But some of the, as we kind of pulled up to think about our performance philosophy, we saw a couple gaps. I think one, it wasn't clear what people were really being evaluated against. Like, what were the expectations for you and your role? And that's both clarity on the very role-based expectations that you would normally see materialize through career criteria or a centralized leveling framework, as well as the very objective kind of OKR business-oriented expectations of here's what the results I'm accountable to delivering.
Mhm.
And we also didn't have a clear articulation of how we balance like our expectations of business impact versus collaboration versus team leadership. And so we decided to really simplify things and say, as an employee at Thumbtack, you are responsible for your what and your how. Your what represents the business impact that you are signing up to have. And then the how is kind of how you approach your work, the skills and behaviors that you demonstrate, your cross-functional collaboration skills, if you're a people manager, your people leadership skills. And we put a stake in the ground and said that 60% of your performance rating was going to be based on the what, that's your OKR attainment, and 40% on the how. So we do put a premium on business impact. In the end, we are building a business and we have to be business and it can be impact oriented, but
Yeah.
still 40% of somebody's rating is from the how. And that's, how they express we have a concept of citizenship. That's like, do you raise your hand to help out? Do you go to plan ERG events? Are you helping plan your team's offsite? Are you leading mentorship programs? Cross-functional collaboration, people leadership skills, recruiting, are you on hiring panels? All of that stuff is still really important. And so we simplified this framework, as well as the process to transition from pretty burdensome twice a year cycles to once a year of a formal review and calibration process, and then really lightweight quarterly check-ins with your manager where you check in on how are things going. You get a very lightweight kind of update and talk through your development goals and how you're progressing against your opportunities.
In those quarterlies, are you also looking at your what's in the house so that you're tracking along the way, or is it a different set of criteria or like a version of the criteria?
Yes, at a high level, like not at a quantitative level, more thematically. So you'll look at
Sure.
how are you tracking against the goals that you set out at the beginning of a half, every individual, sorry, of a half year. We
Mhm.
think of kind of H1 and H2 goals. At the beginning of a half, you commit your individual OKRs, like that's what your performance will be assessed against. So you commit to individual OKRs. As well, and you have the choice to kind of set developmental like goals for yourself as well. And at your quarterly check-ins, you'll check in on how you're progressing against your OKRs, like what's going well, what's not. Like, do we need to course correct, reprioritize, shift OKRs in any way? Because there's often, a business need to change
Of
course,
course. Hmm.
as well as checking in on your strengths and development opportunities. But it's like it's deliberately meant to be lightweight. So it's like we'd rather have 100% adherence to a lightweight conversation than 50% adherence to a very thorough process. And we also don't think it's necessary or appropriate to like have ratings at every quarter. It's really important that we go through a full calibration process to effectively rate individuals at the end of a performance cycle.
So you've just described how the process with through which someone defines their what, the OKRs. Is What is the process for designing the how? Because in my mind, the way that I think about how, the way that I work in the how, which I love, is always connecting it back to the values. Now, for each person, it's a different what that value might express itself as could be different. Is that do values play a role? And then what is the process of defining the how?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about for the what, we think about to back up, we think about our performance philosophy. You have your what and your how. There's actually kind of two philosophies or artifacts that are necessary for this to work. So the what is contingent, is based upon our, we call it our goal setting philosophy. And that's sort of, we have a philosophy on kind of an OKR based system where we cascade goals from the company level to, to department, to team, to individual. So we have a goal setting philosophy and framework and tool that everybody uses to set their individual goals. What really underpins the how is our criteria, is primarily our career criteria, which we're actually right now in the process of rebuilding. We had career criteria that were built about 5 or 6 years ago, and we just realized they weren't serving us anymore. They weren't specific and concrete enough. They weren't up to date with some of the things that we cared most about as a company. So we're actually in the middle of the drafting process right now. And the way we think about it is, articulating like what are it's as simple as the skills and behaviors that you need to be successful. And so some of the skills are, very sort of technical expertise oriented, like domain expertise related skills, but they also encompass communication, collaboration. Like I said, if you're a people manager, management skills, but our values and citizenship, like your participation in strengthening our organization, are equally important. And our actual, like our company values, our 5 company values are expressed throughout our career criteria. And there's a real expectation that you kind of follow those values. And the more senior you get, the more you're expected to just, go from sort of trying your best to live them every day to living them fully, to role modeling them, to setting the bar for what it looks like to embody our values, to spearheading initiative that strengthen our company values. And we actually think about kind of covering the ground of our values throughout the criteria. So we have the first 2, lead with why and make it count, are pretty business oriented. It's like lead with why is very much about like, what problem are we solving? What's our vision, our strategy? That's very much part of your responsibilities as you're leading an initiative. Or make it count is all about having an impact. That's very much embedded in kind of the expectations for results. Own it is another value of like taking initiative, raising your hand. That's embedded in citizenship. Choose teamwork and say what you mean are very much embedded in communication and collaboration. So we both embedded our values throughout the criteria, but also made really explicit expectations of kind of your bar for role modeling and living the values throughout.
So when I sit down with as someone who works at Thumbtack, let's say I sit down with my leader, my manager at the beginning or at one of the reviews, and we're looking at hows the how we're going to do it. I come to the table as the individual and saying this is if I live up to this, model this, exceed this is what it will look like for me and my role.
I think candidly, we're still in the process of building this plane.
Okay.
So we are, I think, definitely still figure out the mechanics of the how part of it in terms of building the criteria and exactly what the conversations will look like. So our intent is that through the career criteria, like you'll be able to look, by level, by role to say, if you're an L6, like a level 6 engineer, these are the expectations of me. And I can then both do a self-assessment as well as sort of set goals for myself. And then the manager can also do an assessment. So the intent is to be very grounded in the criteria for something that is level appropriate. And there's an opportunity for individuals to set goals from a how perspective. So something that I had kind of encourage all of my leaders that report to me to do is to partake in the building of the people team. Like, I think it's not just me who builds a strong people team, it's all of my leaders and all the employees on it. And so I asked each of them to commit to what I call like a how goal. Like, hey, what is one way that you're going to bring your gifts and your strengths to the people team to strengthen it, to make it a better team? I don't really care what it is, like whatever, fuels your fire, whatever your superpowers are, and is going to energize you. But I do have the expectation that you all are contributing to the betterment of the people team. And so I asked them all to sign up for a how goal. So that's an example of how this is starting to come to life as well.
I love that. I love that. I mean, to me, that's the participation in the building of these that make it shared and something that someone can own, right? Like, it's not like I'm assigning it to you. You're saying, here's your expectation, but how you deliver on that, that's up to you. You can decide what you want to focus on, what you're excited about. And that is really, really, I just think a very often underutilized tactic for engaging, and really powerful when it is done well. So awesome. I love that. The what and the how. We'll check in a year and see how that's going. The second part of this conversation that the topic that that we discussed and you brought up that I think is really, really interesting, as well, is this idea of how you are working to prove the business case or the ROI of people initiatives. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? So,
Mhm.
so, uh, I think I think anybody listening to this is going to say, duh, of course there's a huge ROI on people initiatives, that we are the people. Why did you decide that this was something you want to put your time and energy into? And what is it starting to look like? Because you're just starting to kind of get this going. So tell me a little bit about this, and why you started to focus on this particular piece.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll start with a couple core beliefs that I have that I think really colored my thinking. So one is that I have a core belief, and I think Thumbtack has a core belief that your people, your culture, your organization are just critical to the success of your business. I have been fortunate to have spent my career in companies that really valued culture, their employees, and really invested in them in whatever way was appropriate and authentic for the company. But have always found myself in, by I'm sure no coincidence, always found myself in cultures, organizations that value that. I think a second belief that I have is that there's really no difference between managing the health of your organization and the health of your business. Like we're all very used to P&L reviews, to QBRs, to OKR reviews, where you're looking at like all the knobs and levers of a business, like what's happening on the P&L with customer growth, da 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 da. We've all sat through tons and tons of very quantitative reviews of the business. Um, there's a very like parallel world in which you can look at have a very analytical quantitative assessment of the state of the organization, and I really believe that we should apply the same level of rigor, sophistication, analytics to understanding and managing the health of our organization as we do the health of our business. And so that's something actually we've instilled as a long time practice at Thumbtack of having a really robust people analytics capability. We do quarterly org health reviews. At the same time a quarter, we do our quarterly business reviews. Both me and the CFO present out to the company on the state of the financials and the state of the business, as well as the state of the organization. Um, um, and so it's like through these kind of beliefs and early experiences that we formulated our people team vision, which is to power the success of the business through the success of our people. And, as we think about going from just managing the health of our organization, and you kind of take a couple steps forward, you think about, great, how do we do that? We invest a lot of time and resources into doing that, both through a well-staffed people team, as well as millions and millions of dollars of investment in our people programs, whether it's our virtual first model, which includes a lot of events and kind of travel and travel spend. If it's our L&D programming, our D&I programming, decisions that we make about comp and benefits, like there are millions of dollars at stake. And not to just mention the base salaries that comprise the vast majority of our OPEX spend and our employees. And so just as you would kind of similar with this, parallel theme between managing the health of the business and the health of the financials, I would posit that you should think about assessing the ROI of an investment equally, whether it is for a business unit as well as a people program. And so whether you're thinking like, hey,
Yeah.
should we launch this new product? What do we think the future, revenue and profitability opportunity is of this product, or launching this new market? I think we should apply the same principles to our people programs investments and try to seek to understand what is the ROI of that investment, not viewing it as a cost or as an OPEX. It certainly is,
Yeah.
but really viewing it as an investment and then holding an equally high bar to analyzing and assessing the ROI. I think that proves to the business and to other leaders, to our board, to our CFO and CEO, that those are dollars well spent. It gives us confidence and conviction in the dollars that we're spending and asking for. And so this is for us really the next frontier. We have really robust base analytics, but now we're
Yeah.
really starting to think about how do we aspire towards this kind of assessment of the ROI of our investments that we're very happy to make and we believe in, but we don't yet really have evidence. Like, in our gut, we believe they're the right things to do, but we
Yeah.
don't actually have analytical proof that they are a good ROI. So we want to prove that because we believe that's the case.
Are you able to tell us how you're starting to measure that? What is it how are you making this case? Because this is not, I don't know that there's a lot of organizations this diligent about measuring this. So to me, it feels, I could be wrong, right? I'm only a limited, exposure to being one human, but to me, it feels um, new and exciting. And tell me more. Like,
And hard.
how are you doing this? This is, it's like, where do we start?
Yeah. Yeah. The way we're starting is by being forcing ourselves to be very outcomes oriented from the get go of an initiative. So when we do annual planning for the people team, we both, we think about what's our vision and our strategy. We think in words and user needs. What we layered on last year is being very outcomes oriented. So thinking in numbers, like what is the impact of an important outcome that we're trying to drive? So all of our whole people strategy got like decomposed into key results that are outcomes that can be measured as like actual metrics.
Okay.
um, and we knew that it would be a long road to figure out what are the right metrics, how can we attribute, like make attribution, figure out correlation and causation. But our starting point is saying these are the outcomes that we are going after. We do it at a macro company level at like a lot of, the basic metrics that you'd expect, like retention, recruiting, et cetera. But initiative by initiative, sub team by sub team, everybody has selected, 3 to 5 outcomes and the associated metrics that they are hoping to move through their initiatives. Some of this we measure through our engagement survey. We have about a 40-question engagement survey. So it covers a lot of ground with regards to the outcomes that we're hoping to assess. Some of them are more, financial oriented, like what's the efficiency of our real estate spend or ability to hit our budget. But that's our starting point, is just defining what impact are we hoping to have, establishing metrics, measuring them so we can draw some correlation. You might not be at the point of causation between our efforts and our investments to the outcomes. And then over time getting more sophisticated about, can we start to draw more causal theories about the impact that an investment had on the employee experience and through that business impact.
All right, I'm gonna put you in the hot seat. Lots of talk about DNI. I think you called it DNI, DEI, the
Mhm.
investment there. What is the impact, and what have you established an outcome that you're hoping to measure, that you're starting to measure with your DNI program?
Yeah, so for us, there's several. So right, we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So within that, you think about several outcomes that we're really oriented around. And so we have actually this year for the first time, we call it an inclusion and belonging index. There are a handful of indicators that we've put together in order to assess how do we think that we're doing along this dimension. And it covers kind of a variety of different metrics, where we look at, the sense of belonging that people feel, the commitment that leaders are demonstrating towards D&IB, people's sense of safety, expressing their opinions. There's a handful of metrics. So that is one component. Like we want our work environment to be inclusive and foster a sense of belonging. And that, like, that's just not just the D&I B team driving that. That's our employee experience driving that through connection. That's our managers, probably most importantly, driving that through
Yeah.
the types of team cultures that they
Yeah.
foster. But we also look at representation, and we analyze this across the recruiting funnel to see, do we feel like we can have a diverse representation of employees across this? And I think like a lot of other people functions, we're trying to figure out what's the right way to do this, and kind of how do we think about what do we track versus what do we goal ourselves against, given the context of like, the just sort of evolving context of D&I and the legal landscape as well.
Yeah. The INB index. So to me, that sounds like, are you collecting that mostly through, like you mentioned, an engagement survey? Is that where
Yeah,
that data comes from?
largely. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's kind of there's two pieces to it. The kind the self-reporting, hey, on a scale of 1 to 5, da 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 da. And then there's also the direct numbers of, representation, how people report in. And so that's not, I mean, I think that's data that anybody could collect, right? They should be, if they're thinking about an initiative. And what I'm trying to get to now is, for those out there that are people leaders, that are culture leaders, and they want to start to measure the ROI of their people initiatives, where do they start? And so my observation is that there's two kinds of data. There's the direct data that you collect from the retention numbers, they are what they are. And then there's also the kind of interpretive, hey, how are you feeling? And people kind of interpreting that and kind of collecting through that. So when you, if another chief people officer or one of your peers came to you and said, this is really interesting, I can't do it all, where should I start?
Mhm.
Is Do you have some advice, like what's a little chunk that we could kind of start to work on, to start to measure this? Because the reason why this topic is so interesting is because you're staying ahead of the what may eventually occur, which is, hey, we need to get this, budget down, right? Like we're going to hold you accountable. So I like that you're like leaning into that. So
Mhm.
back to my question, where do we start? We haven't done this in the theoretical organization. I'm an HR leader, I'm a people leader. We want to measure the business case. We want to prove the business case. Where should I start, Elena?
I do think that there's an element. Yeah, I think the way you sort of created these two categories of data is spot on. And my advice would be kind of start with the basics across both. Like you do just need to have a handle on your workforce. And it's kind of amazing how much time it takes to stand that up, like getting accurate headcount data, getting accurate recruiting data. We're still teasing out data, issues to make sure that we have that as accurate as possible, accurate retention or attrition data. So I think that I would encourage people to get the basics down and get into a regular cadence of reporting and looking at the data. So I think it's almost like start lightweight, but make it a regular habit. And similar with engagement survey data, like you can have a robust 40-question survey, but you could also just start with a 5-question or a 10-question and survey and treat it as a pulse check. And I think with engagement surveys, the most important insight that you get out of it is sort of the relative position of organizations, whether it's like a department lens or a level-based lens, tenure-based lens, demographic lens.
Mhm.
What you're looking for is kind of hotspots, either like, green shoots and parts that are doing really well or hotspots. Over time, you can get much more sophisticated about the root cause analysis and the nuance in it. But
Yeah,
really, what you want to know is like, oh, shoot, where do we need to go focus and deep dive and like go help support? And so that's where lightweight, but really embedding it in your organization's operating beat. And I actually think that's probably the most important part is like, you've got to have the
sounds
basic
right.
data, but it's
Yeah.
like, do you have a regular cadence of having these conversations with your executive team and even your board? So we do a quarterly people metrics readout. We call it the org health review with our executive team, our senior directors and above, that's the top 40 leaders, and our board. All of those audiences care a lot about the state of the organization. And I think that is actually one of the most important things. And you could even start like with very basic data or no data and start with qualitative insights of just, hey, as an executive team, we're going to spend 90 minutes every quarter talking about what's our assessment of the health of the organization, even if it's just
Mm-hmm.
themes. I think that is a perfectly fine place to start. What matters is that you're having the conversation and creating the space to understand what's happening across the org.
Yeah. Okay. So the picture that is emerging. So one, I would 100% agree, even if it's just don't say, oh, we need to do this huge data collection effort. It's like the goal, the most effective thing is get started, and get started anywhere. Just start collecting that information. I love qualitative information personally. The quantitative is great too, and that way you have something that you can just start to create a habit around. And then the second piece, once you start to do that, what I think you're saying around the causation versus the correlation is, it's almost like it's a scientific experiment where you're saying, we believe, our hypothesis is, if we do this kind of initiative, we would expect this to change. And then you can at least have that baseline, and then prove or disprove that kind of hypothesis. Is that, would you say that that's a fair kind of assessment of how you're going about it, that it's kind of an experiment? And I mean that in all,
Yeah,
you
a
know,
loosely defined way.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, yeah, I say that in jest, but actually, seriously, I do think, yeah, in a loosely defined way, because we're not going to run A/B experiments on our employees, generally speaking, right? That wouldn't
yes,
be appropriate.
assumed.
Yeah.
Assumed
And
as
so,
much.
yeah, I do think you have a hypothesis, you roll something out, you test it out, you watch the impact. And then to your point, like you go learn and validate that through qualitative feedback. And both are really, both quant and qual are really important for giving you signal. We actually just had that happen with our goal setting philosophy. We rolled it out sort of last fall and winter. People went through their first cycle setting H1 goals. And we got a lot of feedback qualitatively, which we were really absorbing and preparing to act on. And then we ran a survey about it and got actually pretty different feedback quantitatively. And so I think that just showed us that like different voices are heard, like express themselves through different media,
Yeah.
and different themes are going to bubble up. So having a really holistic way of assessing the impact of your efforts is really important. And then kind of tracking it, 6, 12, 18 months out, and trying to like, understand the drivers. Like say if you have an attrition spike 18 months from now, like really understanding what drove attrition. Was it something internally that happened within the business, or was it something externally, the market changed, and then trying to connect that to the decisions, the business decisions that leaders made.
Yeah, yeah, that's really, really compelling, starting with that base level of data. And yeah, surveys aren't going to tell you everything. Doesn't matter how many questions you ask, they're really difficult to interpret. You have the data, but what does that data mean? And so your point about slicing and dicing, looking for hotspots, looking for green shoots, it's almost like the data is kind of directional, but isn't the pot of gold
Yeah,
in a
it tells
way.
you where to look. It might like kind of give you a spotlight on a part of the forest to go.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes, yes, yes. Well, I love this. I think that there's such an amazing, you're taking such I mean, you said that the Thumbtack is a very data-driven organization, but you're doing it in the people group in a very human-driven way. And I think that's a really compelling pairing, right? Like there's something really, really powerful about that. And I think it speaks to, the success, or indicative of the success that you guys are seeing. Are you guys continuing to grow? What's the projections? What are we looking at?
Yeah, no, we're still growing. Yeah, the business is doing really well. We just had our biggest product launch in history in April, focused on home care, helping our homeowners care for their homes. And so
Yep.
we've continued to sort of push the boundaries on how we're thinking about innovating the product and making sure that we're serving our pros and customers need. And then naturally through that comes investment in our organization and continuing to grow various functions where there's need to continue investing.
Very cool. Any parting pieces of advice for other organizations and culture leaders that are looking to kind of grow and succeed in sort of this human data-driven direction, use some of these tools? Any final parting words of wisdom?
Yeah, I think that my parting word or thought is really related to making sure that you're serving the business's needs. Like we are all here to, I am not apologetic about the fact at all that we are here to help the business grow. That is why I am unapologetically oriented on the business, the financials, the analytics. Like that is in the end what we are employed to do. And I have a great time doing that. But I think in order to do that, you really got to understand what the needs of the businesses, both kind of strategically from a roadmap perspective, like, what are the objectives, like kind of like the very business oriented OKRs, the financial OKRs, as well as from a really understanding your customer's perspective. Like as you think about shaping your people strategy, what is it that the business is asking for? Like you can't go build your strategy and roadmap in an ivory tower. Like you really got to go make the rounds, listen to the employees, collect the data, go make your rounds, use your HR business partners, set the tone with your team that they need to have boots on the ground. They need to be listening to the full employee base and all the leaders as they're devising their strategies. So I think just stay in lockstep with the business. That is the main thing that you can do to succeed in this role.
I love it. Jelena Djordjevic, Chief People Officer at Thumbtack. Thank you so much for coming on Great Mondays Radio and sharing your hard-earned wisdom.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.